Can you actually rewire your brain to want to get jacked? I've listened to so many gym owners talk about how they had a complete misconception about what was required to get people in shape. Originally, a lot of them thought that the best way to get people in shape was to give them the best possible workout program or the best possible diet plan or give them the best possible gym equipment. Turns out, the best way to get people in shape is to actually have them show up to the gym. The internet is filled with people telling you how to optimize your diet or what the best possible workout plan is. But at the end of the day, if you don't want to work out, none of that is going to matter. I've been going to the gym for over half a decade, and during that time I had periods of great gain and I had periods where I plateaued. And I noticed the periods when I made the most gains were the periods when I actually wanted to go to the gym. By the end of this video, you will understand how to rewire your brain to want to get jacked. So in this video, we're going to cover why you aren't motivated to work out, your brain's reward system, and how to actually rewire your brain to want to get jacked. So let's discuss why you don't want to go to the gym or you don't want to go for a run. Here's 3 reasons why you probably aren't motivated. Now, first things first, you probably have low dopamine. If you're like pretty much every single person in the world right now, you probably have low dopamine. And you have this low dopamine as a consequence of constantly providing your brain with stimulation over and over and over again. You keep scrolling TikTok, you keep playing video games, you keep binge watching TV series, you do all of these things that just keep spiking your dopamine. And what happens when you continue to get those big spikes is your brain realizes you're producing way too much dopamine. Let me bring it all down. You're going to produce less dopamine for literally everything. And what happens when you produce less dopamine for literally everything? That makes things like working out less enjoyable. And when working out is less enjoyable, you probably don't want to do it. And if you probably don't want to do it, you're probably not going to stick to it. And that is the case for so many of us. If throughout the day, you're constantly doing things that provide you with a huge amount of stimulation that are incredibly enjoyable, and you're just tanking your dopamine levels, then it's going to be so difficult for you to want to do anything other than to continue to get those spikes of dopamine, those little peaks, those little rushes. Everything is going to be more hard. So doing something very difficult, like working out, like exercising, is going to be especially difficult. So the first thing is, if you have incredibly low dopamine, you're probably going to really struggle to get any gains because you're not going to want to go to the gym. There was a study done with rats where they effectively altered the brains of the rats so they produced 0 dopamine. What they noticed was those rats effectively had 0 motivation. They would put them in a cage, and on one side of the cage was the rat, on the other side of the cage was their food. And those rats would not cross the cage. They would not walk the 15 centimeters that it took to get their food. And what would happen is, unless the scientists actually fed the rats, unless they put food in the rats' mouths, those rats would die of starvation. Now, if you think about that in your daily life, if you have such low dopamine that you don't want to do anything, then it's going to be very difficult for you to do something that's quite challenging like exercising. It's going to be significantly more difficult than if you had a lot of dopamine. So if you right now have absolutely destroyed your brain, if you've effectively produced so many spikes of dopamine that you produce no dopamine from day-to-day activities, then your workout is going to be very difficult. You're going to be like that rat. You're not going to want to cross the cage to do the workout. Now, the next thing is, not only do you have low dopamine, so going to the gym is not going to be very enjoyable, but the other thing is it's going to be relatively boring. Now, what do I mean by that? When I say relatively boring, what I mean is throughout the day, because you're constantly providing that stimulation, because you're constantly providing those peaks in dopamine, whether it's playing video games, whether it's constantly scrolling social media, scrolling TikTok, watching your TV series, whatever it is, throughout the day, you're getting those big Mount Everest-like peaks of dopamine. So when you do something like workout, what's going to happen is you're going to produce significantly less dopamine than what you're used to. And because you're producing so much less dopamine than you're used to, your brain's going to think, this is not fun. This is a lot less enjoyable than what you were previously doing. You need to do more of what you were previously doing and less of what you're currently doing. So in a very real way, your brain is telling you, I want you to stop doing this. You should not do this because the other things that you do produce more dopamine, because fundamentally, dopamine is provided as a reward. We weren't designed to be able to receive huge amounts of dopamine for not doing anything, but now we have it. And now that we can get huge spikes of dopamine for doing very little, we're not going to want to do things that produce moderate amounts of dopamine, but are quite challenging. We're always going to choose the easy thing with a big spike rather than the difficult thing with the medium spike. And that's why your workouts are relatively quite boring on your day-to-day basis. And it's probably why you don't want to do it. So on top of the fact that you're producing low dopamine, it's also relatively boring. So not a good combination. Now, the third thing is that your workouts, your exercise, it's not automated. What I mean by automated is that it's not part of a routine. It's not part of a structure where you go, I do this, then I do this. So for example, if every day after you got home from work, you knew I work out, I exercise every single day. It's just part of my routine. It's a plan. I do it. Or every day I wake up, and when I wake up, I put my shoes on and then I go and exercise. That's automated. It's part of a routine. If you're not part of a routine, if you just go, oh, tomorrow I'm going to work out at some point, then what happens is to actually do that workout, you require motivation. And as we've been over, if you effectively have no dopamine, then your motivation is going to be effectively zero. Therefore, if you rely on motivation to do your workout, it's going to be very difficult, because if you have no motivation, you're not going to actually do it. Now, obviously, that's the first issue, is that you're probably not going to do it because you have no motivation. The second thing is you're actually relying on motivation in the first place. And relying on emotion to get anything done is probably not a good idea. Because if I wake up and I say, today I'm going to do this if I feel like it, then for that day, maybe I feel good, maybe I do it, but over the course of a week, I'm probably not going to feel like doing something every single day. Let's say that I told you, okay, in a month's time, you're going to enter a coliseum. You're going to fight someone to the death. You're either going to come out alive or you're going to die. And you go through that 30-day period, you train up for that fight, and at the end of the day, you're standing there, you're ready to go in, and you ask me, so how is that other guy's training? Did he look good? Did he look like he's going to destroy me, or do I have a chance here? And I tell you, well, he trained when he felt like it. When he felt motivated, he trained. You're probably going to be thinking, hell yeah, I'm going to kill this guy. However, if I told you, this guy woke up and this guy trained every single day, no matter what he felt like. It was just an automated, it was part of his routine. He just got up and he trained regardless of how he felt every single day. You'd probably be thinking, holy shit, I'm going to get killed. Now, the difference there is that in one situation, you're relying on motivation, you're relying on emotion, which in most cases is not particularly strong because you have no dopamine. And in the other one, you're relying on routine. You're relying on system. And if you have a strong routine and a strong system, of course, you're going to be more likely to get things done. If you want to get in great shape and it's an automatic system of every day I wake up and I work out straight away, that's just what I do. It's part of my system. It's going to be so much easier than you wake up and you exercise at some point when you feel like it. Okay, so now that you know why you're probably not motivated, why you probably don't want to go to the gym, let's discuss your brain's reward system and how you've probably rewired your brain to actually hate working out. Now, the first thing, as we mentioned, is you're getting those quick dopamine hits. Those quick dopamine hits, those things you're getting throughout the day from scrolling social media, through playing video games, through binge watching YouTube videos, through binge watching TV series, all it's doing is providing you those quick hits. And as we know, when you get those quick hits, your brain realizes you're producing too much dopamine and it brings your dopamine down for everything. We know it makes you less motivated. And of course, that's the first reason why you've rewired your brain to hate working out. But the second thing is you've actually reinforced your brain to want to do everything but work out. When you provided yourself with those quick hits, what's happened? Well, you've done an activity like you've scrolled TikTok. You've then received a big spike of dopamine. Now, what's going to happen? Well, your brain is going to associate the TikTok that you watched with that spike of dopamine that you got. And the more you watch TikTok and get spikes of dopamine, the more that you're reinforcing that neural pathway, that connection between doing an activity and receiving that pleasurable feeling. So over time, what's happened is that you've done things like watched a lot of TikTok, you play a lot of video games, whatever it is. You've reinforced that pathway of doing that activity and receiving a reward. And what happens is when you then try to do something like exercise, your brain goes, this is a lot less enjoyable. You receive a lot less dopamine from this than you would from something like the TikTok you're watching. And this is a lot harder. So I don't want you to do more of this. I want you to watch more TikTok. And over time, your brain is going to constantly compare the exercise with you do to all of the other ways that you can get stimulation that are a lot easier, that are a lot higher dopamine. So you've effectively wired your brain to go, I don't want you to work out. I want you to watch TikTok. And the more TikTok you watch, the more video games you play, the more that you're going to wire your brain to go, do more of this, do less of this. I need you to work out as little as possible because that does not produce the same level of dopamine as TikTok. And the third way that you've likely rewired your brain to hate working out is you've wired your brain to only want to do easy things. If your brain knows that it can get these big spikes, these quick hits from doing easy things, things that don't require any form of work. You literally have to put your hand in your pocket, pull your phone out, press a few buttons, and you instantly have a high level of stimulation. You're probably not going to want to do something like run for an hour, like work out for an hour. You're not going to want to do these things that take longer, that are more difficult, that produce less dopamine, when you could do something easier. And as we know, when you have low dopamine, you're going to be less motivated. And if you have less motivation, you're going to always revert to doing easy things. And what are the easy things? The easy things are the things like playing video games, the things like TikTok, the things that don't require any effort. The issue with doing the things that require little effort is they're usually little effort because they have little reward. There's little you get out of these things. You're effectively just stimulating your brain. You're just making yourself feel good, but not moving yourself forward. And the more you do that, the more you choose the easy path, the harder the difficult things that move you towards your goals get. And the more you're reinforcing yourself to go, something is hard, choose the easy path. So you're constantly reinforcing yourself over and over again to choose the easy path. And you've now just created a strong pathway. Every time something becomes challenging, I choose the easy route. I remember back in, would have been about 2020, I was about my first year at university and I was at my grandmother's place because we were renovating our house. And I remember I'd planned on going and working out. I'd planned on going to the gym that day. But I remember I'd found this YouTube channel that was really interesting me and I started watching their videos. And I just kept watching and watching and watching. And I probably spent about 6 hours and I thought, okay, all right, I'll stop after this video and I'll go and I'll exercise. And then what happened? I just watched another video and they said, I'll do it after the next video and the next video. And all that happened is I just kept pushing it back and back and back. And it got to the end of the day and I was just like, well, it's a bit late now. It's 10 p.m. The gym's closed. I missed my chance. And all that happened was because it was so easy to get that hit, because it felt so good watching this channel that I was really enjoying, is that I just didn't want to do the difficult thing. I kept pushing it back, pushing it back, pushing it back, pushing it back. And all that happened was I got more and more and more dopamine, and therefore it became harder and harder and harder to do the difficult thing, and I just ended up not doing it. And I think that is a nice little microcosm for what people are doing through their lives in general, is that we're constantly giving ourselves that stimulation, we're constantly only wanting to do that, and then we push back the difficult things, we'll do it later, and we just run out of time. So what would happen if you actually wanted to exercise? Well, you'd probably exercise more, right? And then what would happen if you exercise more? Well, you would probably get in pretty good shape. So here are 3 ways that we can rewire our brain to love exercising and therefore rewiring our brains to want to get jacked. Now, the first thing that we need to do is that we need to remove that cheap dopamine. If we can get to a point where we've eliminated literally all of the cheap dopamine, all of those quick hits that we were getting that weren't moving us towards our goals, all that's going to happen is we're going to remove those big spikes of dopamine, those big peaks. And what happens when we remove those big peaks is that we go back down to our really shitty low level of dopamine, and our brain's going to go, this is too shitty, this is too low, I need to bring your dopamine levels up. So it brings your dopamine levels up, and guess what? Think about that rat in the cage. You now have more dopamine, you now have more motivation. And if you have more motivation, you're probably going to be more likely to work out. So step 1, of course, is going to be to remove those spikes. The other thing that's going to happen is that over time, now that you've removed those spikes, is that your brain has to now adjust. you're no longer receiving those peaks, those spikes of stimulation from doing nothing. And your brain now has to form a connection between the new activities you're doing and the dopamine you're receiving from those activities. So now that you're no longer getting spikes from things like TikTok, things like video games, things like binge watching TV shows, is that you now start to get spikes of dopamine from things like exercising, right? Things like working out. And what happens if we get spikes of dopamine from things like exercising and working out? Well, we get the action that we do, which is exercising and working out, and we have the dopamine that we receive from doing that action. And as we continue to work out and we continue to receive dopamine from doing that action, we're going to start to draw a connection between working out and feeling good. And as we build that connection, our brain is going to actually start to crave working out. We're actually going to start to really want to exercise. We're going to start to really want to work out. And that's a pretty good position to be in. The other thing is, when I told you before that it was relatively boring to work out because you had those big peaks around that workout, you now don't have those big peaks. So now actually working out is relatively enjoyable compared to the rest of your day, which you no longer have those big peaks. You're now getting spikes of dopamine from working out, far above what you're getting from the rest of the day. And when you do that, when you get those big spikes, those big peaks of reinforcement, all that you're doing is reinforcing your brain, telling your brain, this is something good, this is something that I need to do more of. So as you can see, over time, as we build this up, you're now just reinforcing a pathway between exercising and feeling good, and you're going to start craving it, and it's going to start feeling pretty amazing. Now, the second thing is you need to just do something. You just need to do some form of exercise. You don't have to have the perfect exercise routine. I know there's a lot of people telling you this is the optimal way to work out, or you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way. But the reality is, if you're not actually getting the reps in, if you're not actually taking the action, then there's no neural pathway to connect to. For example, to actually start to crave working out, you first have to have the action of working out to receive that spike of dopamine. If you never actually work out, then you're never going to draw that neural pathway. So you have to just do something. And to be honest, just taking the action is 80% of the way there. Just starting to do something is going to get you most of the way there. Sure, then you can start to optimize, then you can start to get better. But with really anything in life, just taking the first step of taking the action is going to get you most of the way there. You can think about this even in context of starting a business. Like, the first thing that you need to overcome is you actually have to start. If you just keep putting it off and oh, I'm waiting for this to be better, I'm waiting for this to be more optimal, then all that's going to happen is you're not going to get anything done. But if you start to put in the action, regardless of how good the action is, regardless of how optimal it is, just doing anything is going to be the best place to start. I always see people, they're waiting. I'm waiting for this to be better, or I need to, wait to get my new fancy shoes in to lift better. It's like, just get started. Just do something, start getting the reps in, start establishing that neural connection between the dopamine that you receive and actually doing the activity. Because at the end of the day, if there's no action, you'll get nothing done. Now, the third thing you need to do is you need to set a routine that you can actually stick to. The best workout routine is going to be the routine that you can stick to. The best diet is going to be the diet that you can stick to. Don't worry about optimizing before you have consistency, because consistency is going to be optimizing every day of the week. If you just get started, even if it's something easy, even if it's just a really easy way of getting started, it's the best way to do it. You just need to start taking some form of action. Because, as I said before, if we actually have automations in place, if you're just automatically doing something, you can actually eliminate motivation nearly completely. For example, if you have that automated system of, okay, I want to be a great runner. I wake up every morning and I put my shoes on and I run. That is just my sequence of events. If this, then this, then this. You're like a computer program. If you wake up in the morning, then you put your shoes on, then you run. If you get home from work, then you put your shoes on, then you run, right? Same thing. You're trying to get an automated system, and the only way you can get an automated system is by having that consistency. And the consistency is going to come from doing something that you can actually stick to. So it's important on anything you can do is you actually need to be able to stick to it, because consistency really is the number one compounding factor. Anything you can do on a consistent basis will compound. And you've seen that already, because guess what? You're probably pretty consistent at scrolling TikTok. You're probably pretty consistent at watching YouTube. You're probably pretty consistent at playing video games. You have consistency and you are seeing compounding effects, but the compounding effects are just destroying your brain rather than getting you in shape. But if you can have that consistency in the right direction, it's going to be very, very valuable. And if we cut those peaks, if we now have more dopamine, if we actually start to enjoy our workouts, it's obviously going to be hugely beneficial as well. I remember about 2 to 3 weeks into having just completely eliminated all forms of cheap dopamine completely. I just removed all of it. I remember I was about 3 weeks in, maybe 2 weeks, and I noticed that I was really, really enjoying my workouts. I was really, really enjoying them. And I would wake up in the morning and I would just be really craving working out. I remember thinking, oh, can I go sooner? Can I do it sooner? Because I just really, really wanted to do it because I was enjoying it. And guess what happened? Because I loved doing it so much, I was so consistent. And because I was so consistent, I made really, really good progress. And at the end of the day, the progress didn't really come from the fact that I had the best workout routine in the world. It came from the fact that I was consistent, that I was able to consistently do it. And the fact that I had more dopamine, the fact that I had more motivation, the fact that I was consistent and had routines in place helped that tremendously. And it really did impact the results that I got. So if you are serious about wanting to rewire your brain, not just to love exercising, but to love working hard in general, then you can book a free call. I will leave a link in the description below. Otherwise, if you got some value out of this video, please like, please subscribe. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.